Hello, cosmic beings. Welcome to Being Cosmic. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. I'm so glad that each and every one of you are here. So, today we are going to talk about divination. All right. So, let's say you are playing around with this idea of wanting to tap into your divinatory skills. And maybe you got some tarot cards, maybe you got some oracle cards, maybe you got a crystal ball, maybe you've got um a scrying mirror. Maybe you've got, um, a pendulum, for instance. Any of these things. So there's some general, I would say, like rules of thumb. And mainly what it is it's just understanding that there's free will. And when you have these tools and you start to access your gifts and you're starting to ask for and pry into information, there's boundaries. There's lines that if you cross them, yeah, it can cause some clash, we'll say. We should leave it at that. So the first thing to always keep in mind is to be very, very conscious of free will. And with that, we live in a free will universe. And this is something like rule of thumb, like biggest rule of thumb. And so when you're doing something, I'm going to use cards for an example. Let's say that you are asking questions, right? And you're like, I want to know, what the best next projected outcome for me would be. Okay, that's a-okay. You can divine anything about yourself and you're good. Understand that if you are not, this is where it can kind of get tricky. When you're divining for yourself, if your higher self deems that your conscience, your 3D human self, isn't quite ready for that information, you're going to get muddled information. So just keep that in mind. There's divine timing in a certain aspect of experiencing and things like that that we, go through. And it's not always in our highest good to know things beforehand. That kind of takes away from a lot of the experience of life. So just keep that in mind. When it comes to divining for other people, this is when it can start to get tricky. If somebody comes to you and says, "Can you flip cards for me?" you have absolute access to tap into that. If they say something like, "Can you see if this person, my friend or my significant other or my family member or my crush, if they like me back?" That's when you start to mess with the free will line because you do not have that person's permission to tap into that. So there are like ways you can tap into that kind of thing without crossing that line. So an example would be if a friend comes to you and says, "Can you look into my connection with this other person?" You can look into the connection between them. You can look into the relationship between them, and you're looking at it from the aspect of mostly that person that came to you for that reading. So with that, you can find the little you can tap into certain things without messing with free will, and it's just make sure that whatever you're tapping into, you have permission from that person to tap into it. And so here's another thing. If somebody comes to you and asks you for information about their relationship, and then you're like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then you start asking about, like you ask about their relationship, and then you start diving into their finances, technically you don't have permission for that, right? So it's just something to be very, very conscious of. And I'm overly cautious of this. I've just I've seen some people toe these lines or actually cross these lines, and I've seen the backlash. I'll just put it that way. And so I'm like overly cautious about it. Um but it's a good thing to get in in the habit of, especially if you're looking into, especially like cards, things like that. Where it is not crossing free will is if you get visions, downloads, or messages about somebody else. So if all of a sudden you've got this friend and they're going through a thing, and then you get a vision or a dream or a message or something of that nature, that's not going against free will because you are not actively prying into it. So you are being used as a tool to help deliver a message. So that's different. Another way to be cautious of is how you word questions. And that is also something that you can do that will keep it, you know, above. The phrase just left, but it'll keep it, on this side of the free will line. And so, just make sure if you are divining about something, let's say you are asking about a relationship with somebody that you are in a relationship with. So like a significant other, family member, something like that. You can ask the questions of like, what is it about this relationship with this person that I need to be aware of now? And that's a way to get the information without messing with, boundaries and free will and things like that. If, you can ask something like, what is this person's true intentions towards me? Because that directly affects you. But if it's, how does my significant other feel about their job? Then that's when you start to toe that line again, or, actually cross it. And so that's just something to be very, very mindful of. Um, okay. The other thing that you can do is if you use a pendulum or muscle testing or something of that nature, you can actually ask if you have permission to ask about something. So if you're not sure and you're like, this seems like it might be a gray area question, then what you can do is you can just ask, do I have permission to ask about this? Do I have permission to tap into this? And if not, first of all, most of the time, especially if you're tapped in and stuff, you'll actually get like a hit in your solar plexus that's like, no. But you can do like extra confirmation. And so, pendulum, or if you have a deck of cards that has yes, no, you can do that as well. Um, and then you can also do something like flip a coin and, say heads is yes and tails is no. And then you can flip the coin and say, do I have permission to tap into this? And then that will give you your answer as well. And so that's just something I'm always like extremely cautious about it because I'm not trying to, mess with certain forces. Um, but it's just a little side note, little message that I felt guided to share for some of you who are picking up divination, and just in a way to make sure that you're not crossing the line. Another thing that can happen is if you're crossing the line a lot and you're tapping into things that you don't have permission to tap into, um, the messages won't be clear. It'll be muddled. Sometimes you'll actually get like false information and stuff like that as well. And then you're tapping into kind of a gunk energy, would be the best way I can explain it. And so you'll feel it. Um, and for most of you that are watching this, I feel that you're not really interested in crossing those lines. And so this is just a way to keep it above par. I think that's the phrase, maybe. So, all right, anything else? Children. Haha, thank you, Spirit. Okay, the other thing here that gets a little gray area-ish is children. So if you are asking about your children and they are not adults, then you can tap into it. If they are adults, you need their permission. And really, I would say if they're, I would say even when they're maybe like 10 or, maybe 12 or in their teens, that would be a good time to start asking permission. And because you're just honoring that they're a free will being, that they, are a sovereign being in themselves, and they have the right to their energy. And so, but if, especially if it's like a 5-year-old and you're tapping in to see, is this whatever, like whatever it is, if it's your child and you want to tap into something, then you can. And again, if you're unsure, you can always do the pendulum, the muscle testing, the flipping of a coin, flipping cards that have yes, no on them, or some decks have like spreads that have yes or no, and so you can do that too, and just see if you have permission to tap into it. Um, and then if somebody else comes to you and asks for a reading, and it's about their children, they have authority over their children as long as their children are not adults, basically. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb as well. And again, especially with practice and stuff, you'll start picking up on when it's like, ooh, I'm tapping into something, or I'm getting close to tapping into something that I don't have permission to. You'll start to feel it, and it'll feel kind of like, ooh, like you might get some like anxiety hits, basically, like in the solar plexus area in your gut. Um, so yeah, just, keep just be aware of that. And ultimately in okay, thank you, Spirit. The other thing too is if you have tapped into stuff and you didn't know, then it's a little bit different because it's not an intentional thing. You weren't intentionally crossing lines, but now that you know, definitely steer clear of that. The universe and spirit is graceful with us, and then once you know, and then you're intentionally crossing those boundaries, that's when it starts to get real. Yeah, that's that's the best way I'll put it for now. And there's other people out there that talk about, what happens when you cross those lines and you're doing energetic things that aren't great, maybe we could say. Um, so, definitely if you're interested in it, I'm not going to cover a lot of that here, at least not right now. I'm not feeling guided to. If I do feel guided to in the future, then I'll, link the videos and stuff. But for right now, I'm not really feeling guided to kind of tap into all of that. I just want to give you a little bit of a guide on how to get clear messages and then also avoid any backlash, basically. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and leave this here because I don't feel like anything else wants to be added. So, if you have any thoughts or ideas or perspectives on this, definitely let us know in the comments below. And if you like this message, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you would like to see more messages from me, you can hit that subscribe button. It is free and it doesn't cost anything. And I will see you on the next message. Bye.